All right, welcome back. Let's go back to Matthew 24 and continue with our verse by verse of this section. So now that we've kind of laid the foundation of what are they even asking, right? I think it's going to make it a little easier to interpret this. So if you remember, we said in the first video, if you think Jesus, when they're asking this question about the coming of the Son of Man, is his second coming for the church at the end, then you're going to make some translation decisions to reflect what you think he's trying to say. And it's not anything underhanded. It's just, I mean, they're going to have to choose. Do they think he's talking about the end, or do they think he's talking about something that's already happened, or something that's soon to take place? And so the interpreters just have to make a choice. And the prevailing opinion in the last 200 years is that Jesus is talking about his second coming. And so they kind of make some. So let's talk about what we mean here. So immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So a couple of things with that. First of all, this is classic apocalyptic terminology, right? So when it says the stars will fall from heaven, that's, stars are planets, or, suns, rather, billions of miles away. He's not talking about something happening in the cosmos. It's apocalyptic literature, right? Same way we talked about when he says the mountains are clapping, and the hills are singing. It's apocalyptic literature. So when he says that, to figure out what is he trying to say there, right? So turn with me, if you will, to Isaiah chapter 13. Let me show you something there. Isaiah, maybe in Isaiah 13, verse 9. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. He will destroy its sinners from it. So, first of all, anytime you hear day of the Lord, that's some kind of judgment. It is not always the very end, because a lot of these judgments where he calls it the day of the Lord were on specific nations that were active then, and those things have already happened. Day of the Lord just means your judgment day, right? It could be on one of Israel's enemies. It could be on Israel itself. It could be the fall of Solomon's temple. But it just means when, God gives you some grace, but there comes a day when the Lord shows up and judgment falls. And so when he's talking about that, that's what he means. So this in 13 is a prophecy against Babylon, and it gets fulfilled. Babylon is destroyed by the Medes. And so if you go down, look, because remember I told you in the last video, Daniel had this vision of the four beasts, and Babylon is destroyed by the Medes and Persians, right? So look at 13, verse 17. It's the continuation of the prophecy we just read, where he says, the stars of heavens will not, and the constellations will not give their light. So this is verse 10. I think we read 10. Let me read 9 and 10, just in case. Behold, the day of the Lord comes cruel with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he will destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause its light to shine. Right? So, same terminology, essentially, that what Jesus is using there in Matthew 24. The stars will fall, the sun and moon won't give their light. So, either God has destroyed the stars multiple times from the time of Israel till now, or that's apocalyptic literature. And it's trying to say that, in the heavenly realm is authority. And so when he says your light will be going out, essentially, your stars will fall, it's a way of saying your authority is removed. So it's almost like when Jesus says, whatsoever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. He's not saying, because you bind some person here, they're not even in heaven. So he's not saying that, oh, you bind this and that. What he's meaning is, if you speak to your finances here and lose some finances here, he's not saying all of a sudden you got finances somewhere laying around on the floor in heaven somewhere. The meaning of what he means is in heaven is where authority is. On earth is where you operate in the authority that has been given to you from the heavenly realm. And so when you bind something on earth, it's bound in heaven. That's a way of saying, I'm letting you walk in my authority. So that whenever you speak to something on the earth, my authority in heaven has backed you up. That whatever you're saying here on the earth, I will allow that authority from my heavenly realm. If you want to bind something, if you want to loose something here on the earth, I am giving you that authority from the heavenly realm. Whatever you bind on earth, it's bound in heaven. You got my authority to operate on the earth. So when you have a picture here of some nation that's ruling and they're doing all this stuff, and God says, I'm removing your light from the heavenlies. And at the same time says, I'm destroying you. What is he saying? I'm removing your authority to be a nation on the earth. And so when Jesus says, when he's talking about the fall of Jerusalem, that he's removing their lights, the stars are going to, the moon, sun and moon won't give their light anymore. The stars are going to fall. He's saying in apocalyptic terminology that your authority that you had as the people of God and as the city of Jerusalem, I'm removing it. And you will be destroyed. But the reason I wanted to read this from Isaiah is just to go to show you that there's, and this isn't the only one, there's several places. He says something like this to the Edomites and a couple other places where he talks about the stars being rolled up like a scroll and the sun and the moon not giving their light. And all of that is apocalyptic terminology saying God is about to destroy you. And the authority you had, the reign that you had is about to be destroyed. Right? And so, now look at verse 17 of this passage. And so Isaiah 13, verse 17. Remember we talked about Babylon was prophesied to be destroyed. And then the Medes did. They came in. So watch what he says in 17. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, who will not regard silver. And as for gold, they will not delight in it. And he goes on to describe all the stuff that the Medes are going to do to Babylon. The reason that's important is because some people will take that and say, oh, well, maybe this is a future Babylon that he's talking about, and the sun and moon thing is literal and it just hadn't happened yet. Verse 17 says, no, I'm going to stir up the Medes to come in and destroy you. That gives you the awareness that he is talking to the Babylonians of that generation, because the literal Medes did come in and destroy them. And it helps you to see that this prophecy about the fall of Babylon at the hand of the Medes and Persians already happened. And within it was that apocalyptic literature phraseology of the sun and moon are going to go dark, right? And all that is saying is your judgment has come, right? So going back to Matthew 24 then, right? When we look at 24, he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So he's saying the tribulation of those days, that's the days leading up to the fall of Jerusalem. And then you're going to see Jerusalem fall. All the way through the Old Testament prophets, sun and moon going out, your light going out in the heavens meant you were destroyed. So he's saying there's going to be that tribulation period leading up to it, right? John said he was in the tribulation. It was a terrible time leading up to the fall of Jerusalem. And he said immediately after that's over, Jerusalem's going to fall. And you're going to see their light goes out. They're going to be judged. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? He says, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now listen, most people have been trained to read that in modern terminology. Say, oh, see, that's the second coming of the Lord. What else could it be? You know, the way they word it, right? But let me tell you what I think it's trying to say. And I understand why they've made some of these decisions, because they're trying to make it fit with what they think. They think this is talking about the return of the Lord. And so they're translating it in such a way. So when it says the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, it's just literally the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, right? And you say, well, it sounds almost like the same thing. It's sort of. So I think what Jesus is trying to tell them is, what's the difference between the sign of the Son of Man in heaven or the sign of the Son of Man appears in heaven? If you say the sign of the Son of Man appears in heaven, you're saying, I'm looking in the sky and I see a sign in the sky, right? It appeared in the sky. If you say the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, you are saying, what is the sign that he's seated on the throne in heaven? Right? Because the whole conversation is about, when are you coming into your kingdom? When are you going to come into your throne? And so Jesus is answering that question. How are you going to know that he's seated on the throne? You can't see him. He's in heaven. What is the sign that the Son of Man is in heaven? When you see Jerusalem fall, just how he said, just how he prophesied it. He gave you all these signs, and he said, immediately as soon as that happens, Jerusalem's going to be destroyed, and that is your sign that I'm seated on the throne in heaven. And so I believe what he's saying is you have all these signs leading up to the fall of Jerusalem. What is the sign that the Son of Man is on the throne? When you see Jerusalem fall, just how he said, that's your sign that I'm alive, that I'm well, and that I'm ruling and reigning from the right hand of the Father. And so, and he says, all the tribes of the earth will mourn. Well, that's that same word I've told you that you could translate land. And so if you translate it land, then all of a sudden it sounds like he's saying when Jerusalem falls, all the tribes of Israel are mourning because their capital city just fell. You translate it earth, then we're looking for some big apocalyptic thing, because the whole world hasn't mourned over anything, So if the whole world's mourning, this must be something huge. But if you translate that tribes, then all of a sudden what he's trying to say is Jerusalem's going to fall. Her light's going out. That's the sign. You're asking, what is the sign of my coming? That's the sign of my coming. What's the sign that I made it from earth to the right hand of the Father? The fall of Jerusalem. What is your sign of your coming? How are we going to know that you're about to reign from your throne? And so Jesus says, knowing that he's going to be reigning from heaven, he said, you're going to see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, not necessarily the sky, heaven, and it's going to be this fall of Jerusalem. And he said, you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with great power and great glory. That's a quote from Daniel chapter 7 that we read, where he says the coming of the Son of Man is not when he returns from heaven to earth. It's when one from the earth, a human, goes on the clouds of heaven and takes their spot of dominion and authority and reigning, actually in the throne room of the Ancient of Days at the right hand of the Father, is this human that comes up there to reign over everything from the throne of heaven. And Daniel calls that the coming of the Son of Man with great clouds and power and great glory. Jesus is quoting from Daniel, and he's saying, when you see Jerusalem fall, you'll know I'm in heaven, in the clouds of glory, reigning from the right hand of the Father. Everything that Daniel saw, the human that comes from earth and is reigning over everything from the right hand of the Father, he says, you want a sign that I'm doing and I'm up there and I'm still alive? When you see Jerusalem fall exactly how I said it would, that's your sign. Now, then verse 31, and he will send his angels. Now here's another one. That word angel is the word messenger. That's all it means, is messenger. I could have a secretary, and I say, hey, if I'm speaking in Greek, could you send somebody a message? Angelos, message, right? So you have to figure out, is it a heavenly messenger or just a regular messenger, right? And depending on what you choose, if you put the word angels in there in English, that means a heavenly messenger. If you just translate it what it says into the word messenger, then that opens up a different way of reading that. He says, when you see Jerusalem fall and you'll know that I'm at the right hand. I'm going to send my messengers out to the whole world to start gathering in the elect. It's the mission of the church. It's the Great Commission. What did Jesus say? As soon as he ascends on the right hand with the clouds of heaven and he's going to the right hand of the Father, he gives them the commission. Go into all the world, right? The Great Commission takes place a little earlier before that, the one in Matthew. But in Acts, Jesus is sending them out saying, hey, wait until you receive power and then go into all the world, right? He kind of reiterates it, different wording, but it's still the mission of the church. After Jesus goes to the right hand of the Father, is the church, his messengers, the carriers of the message, the gospel, the good news. We are to go into all the world and gather in the elect. The whole world, all four corners of the heavens. East, north, south, and west. That's what that means. The whole four corners. Go into all the world and collect that. So listen, when you read that with the wording that they've chosen, it almost seems like there's just no other way. It could be other than something apocalyptic at the end. But let me just kind of paraphrase this with a slightly different way of saying it. He says the sun and the moon, their light will be taken. Judgment is going to come. As soon as you see the days of tribulation leading up and you realize that Jerusalem is surrounded by these armies and everyone's fled, immediately after the tribulation of those days, their light is going to go out and Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. That is your sign that the Son of Man is in heaven, just like he said. Because when he ascends into the clouds, you're not going to see him. How do you know he made it? How do you know he was accepted? How do you know he's actually reigning from heaven? How do you know he was the one? You'll know I'm the one when every word I said about the fall of Jerusalem is fulfilled. And he said, when Jerusalem falls, my messengers are going to continue to go throughout the whole world, and they're going to start bringing in the elect, which is people who are getting saved. And we have been doing it ever since. His messengers, his church, we have been going out and bringing in the elect from the four corners of the winds. We've got missions, evangelists, pastors, teachers, prophets. We're all doing the work. We are all his messengers gathering in the harvest. Right? Now, verse 32, now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches had already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, that all the stuff he's talking about that's going to lead up to the fall of Jerusalem, he said, you know that the time is near, even at the doors. Assuredly I say to you, listen to this generation will by no means pass away until all these things take place. So everything he said about the coming with the clouds of glory and the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, all of that, just right after that, he said, it's going to happen in this generation. So if you translate those words as something that's way down the road, then you're missing the clear thing that Jesus just said, is that it's not for something way down there. It's something that's going to happen in this generation. But when you translate it more properly and understand that the coming they're talking about of the Son of Man, the coming of Jesus, it's not a second coming. They hadn't even thought about that. It's Old Testament terminology for the king coming into his kingdom, coming into his throne. He's the Messiah. He's supposed to be reigning over this thing, but he's not. When are you coming into your kingdom, Jesus? And he says, before this generation is done, all those things will take place. All what things? The first two questions. Before this generation is done, you will see the fall of Jerusalem, and you will know that the Son of Man is seated at the right hand of the Father, ruling and reigning from heaven. And both of those happen within that generation. They say, we want to know when's the fall of Jerusalem, and when are you going to sit on your throne? When are you coming into yours? When are you coming to reign? Right? That's what they're asking. And both of those things happened in that first century. Everything that he said up to that point, fall of Jerusalem and the coming of the Son of Man to the right hand of the Father on the clouds of power and glory. And he said, you want a sign that I'm up there? It's the fall of Jerusalem. When you see Jerusalem fall, like I said, you know I'm at the right hand of the Father. And all of that happened in that first century. And then we get into the third question. Right? Let me pause this video. It may be a little shorter than the others, and let me give a standalone for the third question. And then And then that may be it for this particular part of Jesus' teaching.